In today's video, we have another edition of NHL Trade Talk. We're going to have some follow-up on yesterday's video regarding the Karl Alzner situation with Montreal Canadiens, as well as the Philadelphia Flyers firing Ron Hextall. They weren't quite done. They've let some more people go today. Plus, we have some updated NHL trade rumors regarding the St. Louis Blues and the Florida Panthers. We'll discuss all that coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top, we have a few items to follow up on from yesterday. First of all, let's get started with the Montreal Canadiens and defenseman Karl Alzner. As we know, the veteran defenseman has not been playing overly well for the Montreal Canadiens, has seen limited time this year, and was recently placed on waivers. He then cleared waivers and was assigned to their minor league affiliate in Laval. It's been since reported after he was assigned to the minors that Marc Bergevin has given Alzner and his agent certainly the flexibility to go out and find their own trade if they're able to find himself a new NHL home. Obviously, that contract is going to be very difficult to move for the Montreal Canadiens, and they'd likely end up retaining a big chunk of that salary, probably close to 50% if they want to stand any chance to move him. Obviously, they still have a lot of years left on that deal, so it's going to be tricky to do, but Alzner has been granted permission by the Habs organization with him and his agent to go out and seek their own trade if they can find it. So we'll see what happens. Otherwise, Alzner likely stays down in the minors here for a while, depending on the health of the current Blue Liners. Hard to say exactly when he gets another opportunity to come up and play. Also depends on how he looks in the American Hockey League, etc. But it has been out there, which is not really any surprise that Alzner can find his own trade if there's one out there to be had. And I'm sure the Habs would love to get that contract off their books based on his recent play. Now, jumping over here to follow up on the Philadelphia Flyers situation. Now, as we know, the Flyers kind of started to clean house a little bit by firing general manager Ron Hextall. And when we discussed that in a prior video here in the last couple of days, obviously it was kind of shocking news in a sense, as I really seen changes likely coming and happening in Philadelphia. I just didn't think it was going to start with Ron Hextall. I really thought it might start with him removing some of the coaching staff, maybe making a few trades, trying to save his job and move things forward to get some better results now, which is what the Flyers organization wants. But instead, he seemed like he was pretty stubborn to do that. He didn't want to remove the coaching staff. Was reluctant to make some trades to kind of jeopardize the future, and it ended up costing him his job essentially. Basically, what we got out of Paul Holmgren at the press conference was that they want to win now. They feel like they've given Hextall enough time to kind of see his vision through, and that they need to get more results now, not in 2 or 3 more years down the road. So they continued to clean house today. At this point, they've relieved one of Hextall's assistant general managers, Chris Pryor, and his assistant coach, Gord Murphy, who was actually a longtime NHL defenseman and had a long history with the Flyers organization, was working as an assistant coach to head coach Dave Hextall. They've both been relieved of their duties. Now, according to Paul Holmgren, they're kind of done cleaning house, if you will, and the next general manager will kind of decide the fate of head coach Dave Hextall and any other members of the coaching staff. So we'll see what happens here, but at this point, it looks as though the Flyers organization wants to get a new GM in place. They said weeks, not months, so I do think they kind of have a line of candidates in mind that they're starting to seek out and talk to, and we'll see where this goes. Now, one thing that I did mention in the Ron Hextall video where we discussed the firing of him was that I thought maybe Dean Lombardi might be a candidate, seeing that he has the general manager experience, he's won a Stanley Cup, and he's been working with the Flyers organization, but the Flyers have confirmed that he is not a candidate. So Dean Lombardi will not be the new GM of the Philadelphia Flyers. I guess probably because Hextall was kind of groomed a lot by Lombardi. He worked over in LA with him as an assistant GM prior to coming over back to the Flyers organization as the GM. So clearly they probably figure that Lombardi has a similar vision and things would not be different enough to get the results they're looking for. But right now there is some NHL insiders and belief out there that the leading candidate very well might be former Minnesota Wild GM Chuck Fletcher, who does have a bit of a history with Bobby Clarke. So we'll see what happens there. But right now, that's kind of where things are at with the Flyers. And it's looking like Fletcher very well might be the leading candidate, but there's lots of names floating around up there. So we'll see what happens and keep you up to date once we get more information based on the Flyers' decisions moving forward. Now, taking a look at some of the more up-to-date NHL trade rumors here that we didn't discuss yesterday. There's certainly some trade winds blowing in the St. Louis Blues and Florida Panthers areas right now. Both teams are continuing to struggle. Both teams were expected to do much better than what they have. Even if you take a look at the Flyers last night, they had a third-period meltdown. There is some talk about shaking things up in Philly, but right now the belief is we probably won't see much happen until a new GM is named, except for Paul Holmgren announcing that he very well might go goaltender shopping if the opportunity comes up. But getting back to the Blues and the Panthers here, the latest speculation I've seen in the Blues is that Doug Armstrong might be open to upgrading the goaltending. Apparently the Blues are very interested in Detroit Red Wings goaltender Jimmy Howard. Now, Howard right now is on an expiring contract. Doesn't have a lot of time left there, so it is believed that they're interested in bringing him in. But at the same time, it's also believed that the Red Wings are looking for a hefty price tag and would probably would want one of their younger prospects that the Blues might not be willing to give up there. And at the same time, the Detroit Red Wings are kind of keen on keeping Howard. I know he's shown interest in the past and kind of finishing out his career and playing with the Red Wings until he's done. So we'll see. I'm not sure if Howard would have the interest there, if the Red Wings will come down on their price. But he is a goaltender that the Blues kind of have their eye on now. I'm not sure what that would mean for the current tandem of Jake Allen and Chad Johnson. I would assume the Red Wings would definitely need a goaltender going back. They may not want the contracts on for like Howard and Allen both, so I'm really not sure how that would kind of all play out. But it's believed that one of the primary pieces that the Red Wings would want would be one of their top prospects, like a Jordan Kyrou, Robert Thomas, maybe even a Sammy Blais. And it looks as though the Blues, it's not really where they want to go. Now, the Blues already don't have a 2019 first-round pick. That's obviously going to hurt if they don't work their way up the standings even further here and they end up quite low. Then that pick doesn't belong to them anymore. So that's not a position they want to be in. They did not envision themselves being this low in the standings here for the 18-19 season. So we'll see, but obviously the St. Louis Blues have some big changes to make since they relieved Mike Yeo and Craig Ruby's taken over. They've had a few moments where they kind of looked a little better, but overall the team still has a lot to be desired. So I do fully suspect some changes to come. And on the back end between goaltending and defense is where I think they really need the most change. And looks as though Doug Armstrong is open to making that happen. Now, jumping over here to the Florida Panthers here quickly as well. They're a team that looks really good on paper and kind of got off to a slow start this year, which has kind of been, unfortunately, something we've seen from the Panthers here, multiple seasons. Like, look at last year. They kind of battled their way back, had a strong second half, and they just missed out of the playoffs. It was so close. This team has a lot of talent on it, but one of the big problems, again, like the Blues, is goaltending. Not that they don't have capable goaltenders. Luongo's actually played pretty decent, but the big problem with Bobby Lou is that he can't stay healthy, and that's kind of catching up to him as he gets older here into his later years. And goaltender James Reimer just hasn't played as well as they hoped that he would be, as well as he's had some injury problems too. James Reimer has a fairly substantial contract for a backup goalie, making $3.4 million, so he might be a little bit more difficult to move depending on what team's interested. But again, we just talked about a team like the Blues that need goaltending. We've talked about other teams before, like the Flames and the Senators, who definitely need goaltending. I mean, Ottawa can't keep riding Craig Anderson here every night. I mean, he's getting pounded with shots of up to 40 shots a game. It's kind of crazy the amount they're giving up there, and that's going to take their toll on an aging goaltender. So James Reimer has been a Senators killer his whole career, so maybe they should try to make something happen there, but they probably wouldn't want to do that with that kind of contract without getting rid of Mike Condon's contract, so that'd be tricky for them. At the same time, the Florida Panthers, if they move Reimer, they're going to want a decent goalie coming back in return, and a team like Ottawa doesn't have that. Now, the Flames, they would have probably Mike Smith, who they might be willing to move out, but they really need another aging goaltender who's had some issues. I really don't think that's the answer for them either. So hard to say what they do, but the Panthers are certainly another team who's kind of interested in maybe upgrading the goaltending situation if they can move Reimer's contract and bring in something that's better suited and get some better results while Luongo's kind of in and out of the lineup a lot, then they're certainly open to that. I mean, there's certainly lots of other names that have been floating around out there within the Panthers trade rumor mill, if you will. I've heard Nick Bukestad's name out there again, but he's a player that Dale Talon, the general manager of the Panthers before, has been very reluctant to move. He's really likes Bukestad's game, but between him and guys like Colton Seaver, Frankie Vetrano, they might be available for the right deal here as well. So obviously the Panthers need to do something. They're not getting those consistent results, but if you take a look at their forward group, they do have a lot of young, very dynamic forwards that can play in their top six group. Mike Hoffman was a great addition this past offseason. He's been tearing it up. You got Huberdeau, Barkov, Bukestad, just to name a few others here. So the Panthers, for the most part, have a pretty decent core group of forwards. They're really the supporting cast in the back end that's kind of been letting them down, in my opinion. So we'll see. There's certainly some options there for Dale Talon, but we'll see. I mean, the Florida Panthers are a team as well that doesn't quite have as much financial flexibility with the salary cap as well because of all the different moves they've made and contracts they've taken on as well. So we'll see. But a couple of teams, again, like the teams we talked about before, there's been lots of talk around goaltending. It's kind of the hot topic around the NHL with teams not getting, the sufficient results they need in the net, which is costing, their teams not to be as successful as they want. So could we possibly see teams like St. Louis and Florida make some significant changes, especially in the net? Certainly would go a long way to turn their fortunes around. So as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments on all the topics we covered here today. Do you think anybody out there could possibly take on that Karl Alzner contract for Montreal, even if they retain half the salary? Do you see maybe Chuck Fletcher being the next GM of the Flyers? If not, who do you think would be a great candidate as well? And who do you think would be some upgrades in goal that the Blues and the Panthers should be looking at, maybe acquiring to give their teams a boost? If you're new to the channel here, hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit the subscribe button, and please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it before you go. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.